Studio. Do any of you know anything about this? Because this has had real successes. It's an Australian success story. Was written, in fact, it started out at 105-seat theatre in Sydney. It's called the Griffin. I don't know whether you've seen the Griffin, Greg, when you're in Sydney's King's Cross. But basically it started there in 2019, and it's written by a former lawyer called Susie Miller. That's her name. And then it since played the sold-out seasons in the West End, and it's now in Melbourne as part of the MTC at Fairfax Studio. And it's sold gangbusters because it's about to open on Broadway as well. So it's had any of you heard the title, Prima Facie, in terms of any knowledge of it or not? No?
Yes, I saw the National Theatre Live screen production with Jodie Comer playing the role. Excellent.
And in fact, after I wrote my review, I saw the review of somebody else who'd seen both and said this blows it out of the park. Now, you've seen that one. That must have been quite something, the National Theatre Live, yeah?
It was. It was a terrific performance, and the shades of grey of the character as she develops the story is just fantastic.
Okay, well, so that's interesting that, again, the comparison. I've only seen this as a theatrical production. Tessa Ensler is played by Sheridan Harbridge, that was the role that she played in Sydney. Successful barrister. She knows the tricks of the trade. She defends her clients. Many of them are alleged sexual offenders, and she defends them vehemently. And she relishes the game. I'm talking about circling witnesses until really she's ready to pounce, having lulled them into this false sense of security. She's really good at what she does. Those who know her know how she operates and what's coming. The witnesses are therefore sort of mere lambs to the slaughter. Tessa chose law after she did particularly well at her final high school exams, and then she received a reality check when she was sitting with fellow legal wannabes for the first time at uni. She was told in no uncertain terms that many wouldn't see it through. That was never going to be the case with Tessa, though. Now she's had 11 years' experience, and she's winning case after case. And even when human compassion might enter the equation for a victim, she justifies what she's doing and how she's doing it by saying to herself that she's merely adhering to the legal process. And then one fateful drunk night, everything changes. Suddenly, she becomes the victim. And life for her will never be the same again. It takes 763 days for her case to be tried. The question is, will she see justice? Now, I mentioned it's been written by a former lawyer, so the insight is really most important. And the reason it's been universally acclaimed is quickly clear when you see this production. Miller's writing, descriptive and insightful, and Sheridan Harbridge, well, she's a force of nature in 90 minutes of really compelling theatre. Just her and a chair, and yet she holds us in the palms of her hands throughout. She celebrates, she pouts, she parties, she's flirtatious, incredible, driven, highly capable, and she displays strength. And then she's shell-shocked. She's vulnerable, she's anxious, and she's alone. In a millisecond, she shifts the mood. She does so with remarkable dexterity and aplomb during the course of this performance. She transforms into Tessa. We totally believe she is her. The picture she paints is vivid, and it's also very alarming. Behind it is the need for change, and that message could not be clearer. Now, since around about middle of last year, I've been really fortunate to see 3 bravura one-woman shows, each of which have left an indelible imprint. And I should say they're 3 one-person plays. I believe they are. I hope I haven't identified them incorrectly. I believe all of them are women. There was MTC's Boys and Girls, which showcased Nikki Shields, and then there was the picture of Dorian Gray at Arts Centre, Melbourne, featuring Erin Jean Norval. In fact, Nikki Shields was an alternate there. And now we've got this one, Prima Facie, with a name that is just terrific. Sheridan Harbridge, she's such a great actor. So this is directed by Lee Lewis, and it's must-see material. And by the way, the title, I'm not sure whether you're familiar with what Prima Facie means. Latin, of course, meaning on the first appearance. So otherwise put as a fact presumed to be true unless it's disproved. So it's obviously appropriate to what we're seeing here in terms of the legalese. So it's Fairfax Studio Arts Centre Melbourne until the 25th of March, but get in early because, you know, already it's all but a sellout. So I would highly commend it to you. And Peter, based on what you've seen as a production on stage, which has been filmed, would you say the same thing? Did you find it compelling?
Absolutely compelling. The writing is just superb, as well as, I can only comment on Jodie Comer's performance, who was superb. So I'm sure that this actress is just as good. It's a terrific storyline.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I'd like to see this on film. As a movie, I think it could be made into a movie. It could be expanded, if you like. You could introduce other characters, and I think it could still work. Do you think so, Peter?
I'm not so sure. I think it might diffuse some of the ideas and the intensity of the story. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. Now, I want to...
Completely odd, Peter. Alex, you mentioned the Griffin Theatre in King's Cross. The main thing I saw when I was in King's Cross, I did a historical tour of King's Cross where all the famous, you learn about the history of the place and some of the famous people like Peter Finch that lived there, and they point out some of the places that no longer exist that were part of King's Cross notorious history.
I was a bit worried where you were going there, because you started off with the main thing I saw in King's Cross, and there would have been all sorts of things that I could have put in there, Greg. But yes, I remember.
That's how your mind works. That's how your mind works, Alex.
Exactly. Thank you very much. I did a tour underneath the sewers of Melbourne. What does that say about me, Greg?
Well, we live in an affluent society.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. I also saw Nosferatu at Maryland Theatre at the Malthouse during the week. Now, talking about silent movies, you must have seen the original Nosferatu, 1922, I think, the German expressionist film, Peter?
Absolutely. I was there at the launch.
Yes, I'm not surprised. I'm not going to say you look like death warmed up. Now, I'm just wondering, Dave, have you seen that original film?
I have, yes. Yep, and they had it just recently at Monsterfest again.
Ah, very good. Yeah, and I've seen it as well. Greg, you've patronised it too?
Yeah, I've seen it, and a couple of other silent films from that era, like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which we did at school.
Yes, exactly. Well, look, this play, it's a reworking of Nosferatu, a very modern reworking. And it starts, imagine this, with this heartfelt warning from one of the characters that only tragedy puts you on the map. And then there's a plea to save ourselves as audience members as it's too late for her. And that rings out as well. Now, that's the start of a tale of an unremarkable mining town in Tasmania beset by evil. And it's called Blue Water. And after a checkered history, it's now struggling to survive as a town. The land's been poisoned. Investors are desperately needed for the mine to have any hope of continuing. And the job of finding them is left to Tom, Keegan Joyce, and also Knock, Max Brown. And Knock is the town's mayor, who happens to be attracted to the doctor, and the doctor is named Kate, played by Sophie Ross. Now, but first Tom must metaphorically wrestle with her journalist girlfriend Ellen, played by Shamita Siva, so she doesn't spill all the details of an environmental impact report into the town and the mine and so forth. She reluctantly agrees to hold back before Tom takes off to pursue a promising investment lead in Sydney. His trip to a remote mansion surrounded by woods and shrouded in fog is anything but straightforward. And when he does arrive, he's greeted past midnight by a pale-looking, confident man who calls himself the Count. Jacob Collins Levy is that role. Fortnight later, Tom is awoken by a desperate call from his girlfriend, who has no idea what's become of him. He's disorientated. He's clearly in the grip of something beyond his reckoning. He's still with Count Orlok, who then is invited back with him to Tasmania. After further drama en route, in quick time, Orlok is putting the bite on many of Blue Water's remaining residents. So I mentioned this is a modern take on an age-old story. Well, you go back to Dracula, which goes back to 1897 and the novel by Bram Stoker. The playwright here is Kezia Warner, who admits he doesn't know much about vampires, Clearly, though, he's been sucked in, creating a dramatic. Thank you very much. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for Greg puns here, and he's created this sort of dramatic, humorous, and seductive piece of work. Now, apart from the writing and the acting, staging is everything, and it's here that the set and costume designer called Romany Harper has done remarkably well. And imagine there's a sprawling set, the backdrop of which is ceiling-to-floor red curtaining, in front of which sits six doors. So you've got the curtaining at the back and the doors in the front, and also in the room, and that's still at the back of the stage, it's a really huge stage, is this heavy boardroom table and some chairs, and the boardroom table lights up, so it can go to blood red. The mood lighting by Paul Jackson, sound from Kelly Ryle does the rest, and it's very atmospheric, Nosferatu. It immediately drew me in. It carries with it no shortage of laughs due to the surfeit of pithy one-liners, and it's also not without its surprises. I thought Collins Levy was excellent in his portrayal of this suave, controlling count, never short of answers, and he's got this sense of comic timing which really works well, great sense of comedy. Also appreciated the surety in Siva's performance as the hip journo, driven by her instincts to probe further into just what's going down. Joyce readily steps into the role as Tom, popular, flummoxed nerd, caught way out of his depth looking for investments. And Ross brings practicality and suspicion to her persona as Dr. Kate, while Brown is eager to please as the Mayor Knock. It's very creative, this Nosferatu, certainly engaging and entertaining, although I did think it dragged a tad before it reached its climax. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes could have been saved by sort of shaving it off once it was established what Count Orlok was up to in Blue Water. But the lion's share of this piece, which really is the lion's share, directed by Bridget Belotis, has a lot of spark and sizzle, and it's bloody good fun, Greg. That's what this play is all about. At the Maryland Theatre, at Malthouse Theatre, until the 5th of March, and it is called Nosferatu.
And so there you go. Bloody becoming a pain in the neck.